Wherever you look in New Zealand, there's evidence of the shifting foundations under the shaky isles. This old volcanic crater in the heart of Auckland is a reminder of a fundamental reality. New Zealand is torn between two tectonic plates. Stretching along the spine of the country is the Alpine Fault. As one plate grinds past the other at 4 centimetres a year, stresses build up in the landscape like a tensioning spring. The country is peppered by tremors and quakes from the north to the South Island, and these are just from the last 10 years. When it comes to earthquakes, cities here need to be on constant alert. The city of Christchurch wasn't a place where the seismic hazard was thought to be severe. But in less than 2 years, Christchurch has twice hit the world news with earthquakes stronger than magnitude 6 and suffered terrible loss of life. I've come here to learn what it means for New Zealand's second largest city to find that it's built on a seismic hotspot. Earthquakes have become part of everyday life here. Over the last 18 months, in and around Christchurch, there have been more than 10,000 aftershocks. 23 in the last week, several every day. In fact, there could be another one at any moment. Now, while most of those aren't strong enough to be felt, the impact of the strongest ones mean that entire suburbs have been abandoned. Tectonic geologist Mark Quigley once lived here. His house is one of more than 5,000 bought by the government to be pulled down and returned to parkland. This is yours?
Yep.
How long has your house got now?
Well, it's scheduled to be demolished in about a month or so.
Oh.
So, not long. It's been here since 1910, but it's near the end of its life.
One morning he woke to a different world.
We had this gentle rolling, which then just in seconds just turned into this incredibly violent shaking. And the bed was moving around on the floor and things were falling and crashing. And then it's sort of subsided.
What was going on that day out in the backyard?
Well, I mean, right when we came out, we could see the liquefaction process in action. So basically, this fine sand and silt was coming out of vents in a variety of places. In this case, the vents were all lined up, so there's an array of all these bubbling vents. Sand coming out, cascading over the sides of these, almost like a volcano erupting, and the water just surging up over the top.
Liquefaction happens when loose waterlogged soil is shaken strongly enough to be compacted. As the ground level drops, a slurry of muddy water is pushed to the surface, and the damage flows far beyond a few backyards. This is the area of Christchurch City, and this is the area affected by liquefaction.
Every time there's an earthquake, in this case above about 0.17 Gs, or 17% of the acceleration of gravity, that is enough to trigger liquefaction in these properties. In this case, we've had 8 instances of liquefaction where the ground shaking has been of sufficient intensity and duration to cause this sort of liquefaction process.
Unless the water table is pumped out or the soil stamped down and injected with denser gravel, each earthquake will refloat suburbs on a sea of mud. Houses are left twisted and broken. Streets once level with bridges have sunk so close to river level they face a new threat of flooding. 40 kilometres west of Christchurch, the lush rural landscape of the Canterbury Plains is quicker to heal, even though this was ground zero for everything that's hit the city. On the 4th of September 2010, a fault nobody even knew was there generated a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, which spawned a swarm of smaller tremors.
This really large fault we call the Greendale Fault, that thing unzipped in this direction here, and it actually dropped this part of the river down about 1 meter.
Seen from space, satellite radar shows how the 40-kilometre-long Greendale Fault shifted the landscape. One side in blue moved west, the other in red moved east. Has this fence changed any since the day of the quake?
Yeah, well, it was straight before.
Bit of a dogleg now.
Yeah, as a result of that, there's been about 3 meters or so of right lateral displacement, but it's also been thrust towards itself and uplifted about 1 meter or so here in this area.
3 metres one way, 1 metre up.
Yeah, this was one of the areas that had the maximum amount of vertical offset because of the orientation of the fault and the way that the rupture occurred.
So this little hill here, that's new?
Yeah, this was all perfectly flat. All these sort of features have been broken apart by the earthquake.
To discover how dangerous this fault could be in the future, Mark's team looks for evidence from the past.
Because the instrumental record of recording earthquakes in New Zealand is so short, we have to rely on the geological record to tell us about the return times of major earthquakes on given faults.
Ground-penetrating radar on this sled scans the layers of gravel and sand beneath to read their earthquake history.
Which would in turn tell us that this is an active fault line that, you need to watch out for in the future. It wasn't a one-off event.
Even if big earthquakes happen here only once every few millennia, this one triggered a rolling sequence of aftershocks that will last for years to come.
In a matter of seconds, probably about 40 seconds in total, this network of faults ruptured here and sent that seismic energy into Christchurch and beyond.
Repeated strong aftershocks literally shake down the suburbs and liquefy their natural soils. But the problem doesn't end there. Built on reclaimed land at the edge of the city is the Port of Lyttelton, one of the busiest in New Zealand. The safety of the port's foundations worries seismic engineer Brendan Bradley.
We're always taught as engineers to expect the unexpected, but I think from that point of view, it was highly unlikely that we were going to have an earthquake directly below us.
But that's exactly what happened in February 2011, an aftershock of magnitude 6.3.
Well, the earthquake epicentre was about 1 or 2 kilometres north of here, directly under the hills.
That close?
That close. And so basically the ground shaking here at the port was extremely strong, and essentially that all of the ground has moved out towards the sea here, and you can see where we're standing here on the wharf, we're actually about 1.5 metres higher than the ground just on the other side. So that's the level that the ground has sunk during these multiple earthquakes.
That's tremendous damage for anywhere, let alone a port.
Absolutely.
Despite the damage, the port continues to operate while it undergoes repairs. But the risk remains that strong ground shaking will collapse the soil under the wharf again. There are 200 or so of these seismographs dotted around New Zealand, and 3 of them just at this port. Now, the country's wired for earthquakes. This is transmitting any strong motions it picks up in real time. I can see it here on the laptop, and it's telling me the last earthquake recorded was just a few hours ago, just offshore here, magnitude 3.6. The good news for Christchurch is that the aftershocks are becoming less frequent as the focus of seismic activity moves east.
It's continued to migrate offshore, and for us that's a good sign because it's moving away from the main urban centre.
Essentially, Christchurch is built on soft, muddy swamplands surrounded by a large rocky bowl. It's this geology that can amplify an earthquake.
The waves get stuck in this top layer, and that causes shaking which is a lot stronger and which lasts a lot longer. And that's really what we mean when we talk about this idea of a bowl of jelly, that this basin of sediments wobbles a lot more than the underlying rock which it sits on.
And when shallow aftershocks are amplified by the bowl of jelly, the shaking far exceeds what the city was built to withstand. The ruined CBD is testament to that.
The strength of the ground motion here in the Darfield earthquake, and in particular in the February earthquake, was larger than that which we designed these buildings for.
Even after 18 months, much of the city is still closed off as the demolition crews finish what the earthquake started.
If we look here where we are in the centre of the city, then actually this building over here has to be demolished. This building here, this building over here, this building over here, this building, and also this building over here.
There's a long way to go.
There is. It's going to be a completely new city.
A quarter of the buildings in the CBD were made of unreinforced masonry. Now none remain standing. For engineers like Brendan, it's an opportunity to rebuild a safer city from the ground up.
The technology has improved so significantly over the last 20 or 30 years. You can now design buildings for a fraction of the cost more, even less than 5% more cost, that can survive these type of earthquake events with essentially no damage. Technologies such as base isolation.
Base isolation, what's that?
So base isolation is essentially where we isolate the structure. We lift it up off the ground and we place a material which is largely lead rubber, and when the earthquake shakes and the ground moves, the structure stays still.
Their hometown may be changed forever, but it still offers these two young scientists reason for optimism.
We have been given an opportunity to make ourselves the world's most resilient earthquake city. And we have some drawbacks, we have some setbacks in the sense of where we're located. Geologically is not ideal. You know, we know that. We have challenges to deal with.
We shouldn't just be thinking about, in 10 years, let's get back to where we were before 2010. We should be aiming for 2100 and saying, you know, let's make something really good. Let's use this chance to do things that before we weren't bold enough to do.